Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. I scrolled through real quick and saw quite a few questions, so let's make the introduction short and just get right into the Q&A. Shout out to the sponsors, of course, Steel Series. They sent me a bunch of stuff. Some of it's behind me that I've been giving away on my Twitch streams, and I didn't make any content for them because of everything that's been going on in my life. So if you ever want to support the channel, Steel Series is a nice, easy way to do it. Exclamation mark Steel Series if you're in my Twitch chat. It's in the description of every YouTube video, and there's a 12% discount code year round. Or use a better discount code. As long as you use my link, that's really all that matters. And also shout out to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. Nobody has to support. All my content is available for free. I don't really like paywalling content. I just don't think it makes sense for the type of content that I make. Maybe one day if I make something that I think works better for it, but quite frankly, I'm not going to be looking for that. So that would definitely be a matter of circumstance. But for the meantime, anyone over there who's supporting is supporting just because they want to. So thanks to them. Anyway, like I said, saw a lot of questions, so not going to do an announcement section. Let's get started. I'm also going to go headset list this week because my hair was looking kind of strange and all of that. I got to cut this soon, though. Hashtag Mondays with the man formerly known as Angry. I've never been known as Angry. I've only been known as Happy. I have been known as Mage once, though. Hiya. Hi. Hopefully three quick questions. Hopefully quick questions. One, how long do you plan doing the 14 Let's Play series? As long as people watch it and as long as people want it. Two, do you know any easy way to track how many calories you are taking in and burning over the course of a day? There are plenty of apps, simple ones like MyFitnessPal. On top of that, you can get things like a Fitbit or any sort of like Apple Watch or something to track your calories. I would not take those calories as exact. I would always assume that it's overcounting them, but honestly, you just kind of got to take the information that's in front of you and try not to think about it too much. And three, trying to fill some roles for a static. Any tips? Good luck. I don't really lead statics. I don't like recruitment. I don't really like managing people. I can handle people. I can spend time with people, but managing people, not my strength. I would just say don't rush through that process and make sure that you're diligent, that they are people that will get along with everyone in the group, and that could be a little bit time consuming sometimes, but you got to do it because the alternative is a miserable time. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps. Hi. Was wondering if you often realize when you are presently in a moment you'll look back on fondly years later. Okay, so you're saying that when I'm doing something, you think am I thinking of it as a moment I will look back on? No. I don't dwell too much. I'm very good at remembering things that happened in my life and whether they were profound or not. But in any given moment that I am existing in life, I don't want to think about that moment when it's history. I want to be able to be in the moment, in the current time, in the actual moment that I'm in it. So no, I never look at it as like, man, I can't wait to look back on this, or man, I'm sure I'll look back on this. It's like, yeah, like I might throw that statement out there once in a while, but I'm never really thinking of it. If it does pop up, it's like momentary, and I just move on because again, I want to keep being in the moment and not already reminiscing about how future me will feel about that moment that just passed. I don't know, it just doesn't mesh with me psychologically or spiritually in any way. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello. Hi. Hope you're doing well. You too. A good while ago, I asked a question regarding the Criterion dungeon Allo, and I was struggling with the second boss. Finally got my clear a few weeks ago, and I've slowly started progging the Savage version. I have two questions regarding it. Savage Allo is a time. Should we wait for our 2-minute cooldown to come back in between fights? So, this is incredibly dependent on the actual clear speed that you are undergoing. You can see what the enrage timer currently is in the duty timer. So now you need to weigh how long the fight's actual enrage is, meaning if you took the fight you're about to do and stretched it all the way to the very end versus the amount of time remaining. I will say that most of the time waiting on 2s is something you can do for the final boss for absolute certain. Doing it on the second boss becomes a little bit more of a concern. Doing it before the final boss can be potentially a concern. Now, again, it's been a while, so I don't remember. What I would do if I were you, look at my clear VODs for the Savage Criterions. They're all up on my YouTube. See what our group did and what the time remaining looked like at any given point where we made those decisions. And you can judge from there. Because while I don't have them in front of me, I only know that holding for the final boss was always okay in the groups that I did it, but I don't recall us holding anywhere else, unless it was maybe 10 or 15 seconds at most, and it may not have even been for the 2s, it may have been for like a tank cooldown or something in that vein. So I would just look at my footage, because that's going to give you all the information that you need. Two, do you happen to know the length? Yeah, so that ties into the first part. Again, same deal. If you go to my VOD, now obviously in my VODs, we're killing them before Enrage, but you could probably tack on 20 to 30 seconds on almost all of them, and you would get the accurate Enrage timer. But yeah, that's that information is on the internet. I just don't know it off the top of my head. Savage and normal have the same Enrage timers, but the Savage mode versions have about 10 to like 11% more health. So you just need to find the Enrage timer for any of them. It doesn't matter Savage or not. That will apply to the Savage version. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. Hope you and Sophie enjoyed the week together. We did. Yeah, she left earlier, so I'm getting some work done now. Like, immediately to cram mode for me. You know how I do. My question this time actually isn't 14 related, but rather with Clare Obscure. What's been your favorite part of the experience, and is there anything that stands out that makes you wish? I wish more games were like this. So I never like to wish more games were like a game. Because that's how we get situations where we have too many games like a game, and then we get bad versions of games that are like a game, and then when more games that are like those games come out, we dread them being bad because we don't know if they're good or bad. You start to then kind of look at developer bias slash preference, I suppose, and that begins to heavily inflate. Like, then everything becomes a I don't want more games to be like a game that I like. Because I want to, when I like that game, I don't want to have to like go to bat for it, right? I want the game to speak for itself. And if it starts getting flooded by a number of other games, then it's tough. Like, for example, with Clare Obscure, the gameplay for me, I'm like, oh, I love, Mario RPG, games with the timing elements, which is where I mostly get mine from. Some people talk about Legend of Dragoon. Some people talk about other games. Like, there are plenty of games that utilize that like sort of more active turn-based system with the parrying or the dodging or the blocking. Like, there's different games, different things. For me, it is genuinely the effort put into the classic RPG elements that disguises them in such a way that they don't even seem like old RPG elements. Things like the world map and the traversal of it, the way that you progress with the characters, the equipment, the builds that you can do with it. It doesn't really ever pull you and say, hey, you can do all these things. It just puts things in front of you, and it's up to you to kind of go from there. So I'd say, if anything, it's another example of not having an abundantly over-informative UI can improve the user experience pretty greatly. Like, having no mini-map was a complaint some people had, but I really liked, again, the minimalistic approach to the UI, and the mini-map is another part of that. I'm kind of glad that it wasn't there. I would have been okay if it was there. I would have been like, oh, I wish that wasn't there. But having played without it, I don't want it, if that makes sense. So I would say my favorite part of the experience is allowing you to immerse yourself in it by keeping the gameplay elements out of the forefront, except when they need to be there, and just allowing you to figure out how to go through them as they appear. Hashtag Mondays with the Haps, man. Hey, Happy. Hi. Want to chime in about the person who asked the question about getting 4 dancers in Red Mage. Ah, yeah, where I said there's like different queues. Yeah, so you're just reiterating, yeah, that this is, there are technically like different queues, and it tries to match people based on it. But sometimes it just doesn't care. Like, it will just pull people like across that. Like, if you can have a bunch of the same DPS get pulled in, and it doesn't really care that there's different queues amongst them, but if it can, it wants to keep them separate, and then have different queue times between melee, ranged physical, and ranged magical. But it doesn't always work out that way. So there's some sort of like deeper system in there that makes it so it's not obnoxious if you don't have exactly this many melees or exactly this many, that whole thing. Now, is there an actual question here? Now for a question. Okay, good. Do you foresee an expansion where you only get a single new job? I've been predicting a single new job for like 2 expansions now. They've said that it's really tough to only do 1 new job in an expansion. They think it's maybe doesn't like raise enough excitement, because if then, there's only 1 role of people that gets to be excited. So, I think they're going to try to avoid that unless there is some other gameplay related system that they're introducing that will drastically change enough other experiences, which is why 8.0 is very much a contender for a single expansion, a single job expansion, because they're talking about really adjusting the way that jobs function and doing kind of an overhaul of that. So if they're doing that, do they need 2 new jobs? Not really, because we could end up with a lot of jobs that feel like new jobs. I don't think we'll ever see no new jobs. That I don't think we'll ever see. But yeah, I've been predicting the single job expansion for quite some time. And I don't think you can use limited jobs as an example. I think they understand limited jobs are really like their own mini games. They don't count as a job release. So I don't think that that's going to be the case. But we're definitely getting another Fizz ranged and another tank probably for the next duel. But if we do only get one new job, it's going to be Fizz range because they're the ones now that are out of sorts in terms of the number of available options. Hashtag weekly Q&A. Well, I mean, the hashtag was just weekly Q. The end A with Mrhappy then disappears into it. How you doing there, Mr. Haps? Hello, and how did do? As much as it'd be cool for them to make one whole raid area and having to go from boss to boss, I do think there's actually one thing they could add from WoW. There's a lot of it might take a second because there's a few punctuation errors here, so excuse me if this takes a little bit. Back in Mist, they added something called challenge dungeons. I don't want challenge dungeons. I'll get into it in a second. And I know they're not mythic dungeons. I know you're going to explain what they are. They're just the they're the time trial dungeons where you're synced to everything. Yeah, let's see. That's what they are. Yeah, if you're unaware. Yeah, no. So, not a fan of challenge dungeons for a couple of reasons. One of Final Fantasy XIV's biggest problems that it had in Endwalker, and technically can be a problem in other contents, is reward structure. People, A, want their gear to matter in a lot of stuff. Things like Unreal do upset people where they're synced down. A lot of people don't like having gear synced down. It makes their gear feel worthless. It takes away a lot of that reward feeling from the other activities you've done. Number two, the actual rewards for something like this, if it's not just like if it's a mount, people do it once, they get gold, and then they stop doing it. If they have to do it 10 times to do that, great. No matter what, this is either A, unattractive for people who are generally dungeon goers. The average dungeon player does not care about speed pulling a dungeon. I have learned this over the years. There was a point where I didn't think that was the case, and I have seen enough examples anecdotally to accept that most people are not trying to speed run dungeons. It is just not the normal thing that the average player is like, I'm trying to do that. And that's with the normal dungeons that we have now. Imagine if they had the specific challenge modes, which would probably require you, let's be fair, we would just figure it out how to do it once and then it wouldn't be a problem at all. Even if it is synced, it literally won't matter. There's only so many ways you're going to AoE a boss and AoE ads in Final Fantasy XIV. Then it becomes a rotation check, and we all know what I'm going to say about that. So I don't see any value in it. I think Final Fantasy XIV dungeons are not made for this, the same way I feel about mythic dungeons. I feel like if Final Fantasy XIV is going to reuse dungeon assets to do something different, they need to make something that is not just a remix of the dungeon. It needs to be a little more intense than that. It can't just be what mythic is or what challenge runs are. Those only work because WoW dungeons are not simple A to B to C's most of the time. They are like A to maybe one way to B or another way to B, or like go to B or C, and then after B or C, then go to C or B after, then to D. There's elements that actually factor in how you can do the dungeon as fast as possible, like weird ways you can pull bosses or trash mobs or like pull trash into bosses, etc., that we don't really have in Final Fantasy XIV, not in modern 14. So they'd have to, I think if they're going to do anything dungeon-wise, they just have to start over and come up with a brand new idea that utilizes that. I'm still a fan of the idea. If they really want to do harder dungeons, don't even make Criterions their own separate dungeons with like variants, because I think variants without a roulette are they're a little underbaked. I feel like variants need some replayability that isn't just, go through the 12 paths and you probably have everything and then you never do it again. I would like to see them have a roulette or some sort of method or reason why a player would go back and participate in them again. And for Criterions, I would rather, honestly, they just Criterion up existing dungeons. Like if they really want to do something that's specifically high-end difficulty, I'd rather they just do that and reutilize the assets, because we know they've had harder versions of these dungeons in testing that they've then weaned back, and they've talked about those versions of the dungeons in like live letters and stuff before. So this would be a way to kind of not really revert them to pre-tested modes or like to balanced modes, but to expand on what they're capable of within those functions without making brand new assets for everything. That's kind of what they do. They make the variant and then make the Criterion on, with those assets. So it's kind of the same idea, but without making the variant in the first place. But I also just think if they're going to do anything dungeon related, they need to offer more dungeon content for the average player, because there are average players that want more dungeons in the game. They want us to go back to 2 dungeons. I'm obviously not a fan of that, but there is a large consensus for that amongst the more casual player base. So maybe going back to that, maybe something like that is more to consider. And then if they are going to do a Criterion, then having the extra dungeons makes sense because you could do it for like one dungeon here and another dungeon there, and you can rotate between them. There's options begin opening up. So if they're going to do anything dungeon related, instead of looking at me, the high-end player, you probably just look at the average player and do something more for them. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Haps. Hi. Hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I was wondering if there's any times that your group wasn't able to properly read a simple mechanic for longer than expected. I think that happens. So most week 1 hardcore groups, we don't read mechanics correctly, or we read them correctly, but don't try to push that information to make an actual more consistent strat. You kind of want to brute force. So with a Savage tier, you tend to want to brute force through the first 2 encounters, and if you can, the 3rd encounter. The 4th encounter, you're more likely to come up with something that's more sound because you'll spend more time on it on average. But things like what roles are being targeted, or any particular pattern, really easy to miss when you come up with a strat that your group can just kind of do without thinking. Our seed strat was a good example. Like, we didn't know that it was 1 DPS and 1 support for the seeds during the second section of M7S, and that's probably the hardest section with the seeds in the entire fight. So we were just doing it completely independent of that possibility. And it wasn't until, the following weeks where we were like, oh yeah. And then someone's like, I thought I brought that up during week 1. And it's like, yeah, maybe you did, but it got kind of swept under because we just didn't think we didn't come up with a consistent way to use that information, etc., etc. So yeah, no, that happens all the time, especially in hardcore groups that are just blasting through fights. A lot of the times they don't even figure out how to do the mechanic. They YOLO it, res through it, and they just still have enough DPS. Is honestly how some of the earliest groups end up getting through that kind of stuff. Did not realize for quite some time the Proteans echoed the initial location when doing Arcadia. So now that's different. That's not something as fundamental as that. That's really easy to notice. Like, the closest thing that you get to that is trying to figure out if something's targeting roles versus light parties. For a long time, we didn't have role specific mechanics like flip to A side. It was like something that like Tsukuyomi did and like maybe one other fight, but they've done it a lot more in recent years. So now it's something people are kind of ready to, kind of move around or expect, and that's changed things a lot. So it's usually stuff like that, and it's usually with like a Protean targeting someone. But the echoing, no, definitely not that. Definitely not anything as what I would consider as obvious as that. But every group has its own different quirks, and every group is also operating at a different skill level and amount of play experience, and so it's not that surprising to me that that could happen. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, hello, hi. Hope you're doing good and that the 11 leveling is treating you well. I got to record more parts for that this weekend. I have a part already ready for this week, but I got to get more parts recorded. I'm trying to stay well ahead of that, and the 14 one, which I also have one for. Yeah, I got to probably record like 2 or 3 more 11 parts, and then 2 or 3 more 14 parts, and then I already have some other videos I got to get posted this week, and I have a video for next week, and we have the raid retrospect. We got a lot of video ideas rolling through, and I might make another cosmic exploration one as well. Speaking of, I'm trying to get through the game myself. I'm not really interested in endgame, and I'm mostly in it for the story and lore, but I'm worried about my job choice. As someone who wants to enjoy the game's story, should I be worrying about that? Dragoon Red Mage is what I'm thinking. Dragoon Red Mage is really solid. That's not a bad option at all. Dragoon Sub Mage is one of the more common things in general, and it's in its own way, it's gotten somewhat better. I wouldn't worry. So your trusts are the majority of your power, and they will almost always hard carry you until the end of Rhapsodies. I'd say late into Seekers, and then Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, the end of Rhapsodies, and then if you really go the long mile, your choices in your gear start to really matter in Voracious. Doing Voracious without committing to earning a really good Rema and some decent gear sets is a terrible, terrible experience, especially if you're doing it alone without any other players. Your trusts do not become reliable in that case. Your job choice becomes immensely important. So like a blue mage that's kitted out, for example, probably has a better time on average than, let's say, me on Dancer, just because, I don't really have as many things that I can use to keep myself alive. I maybe don't have the right gear for like solo. Like blue mage has all these buffs and ways to like keep track of itself and like really like accelerate itself. And there are other jobs too that can do really, really well in those snares. But until the end of Voracious, I would say job choice is nigh irrelevant. I would say to not really lock yourself into a sub-job choice like Red Mage, even if it's solid, and be open to something like, you know, Dragoon Samurai or something in that capacity, or even another job entirely, depending on how much effort you put into Dragoon in the first place. But I would know until like so far into the story that it's like you could probably just shout for help at that point. It's not going to be a thing. It won't be a thing for Xylar. It won't be a thing for Chains. It won't be a thing for Treasures. Wings has a couple of annoying missions, but that's not really a job choice. That sucks regardless of your job choice, so that's a different thing altogether. None of the, like, Abyssi, none of those matter. The other add-on scenarios, Kupo de Atad, no. Literally just those few scenarios. And even the Seekers is questionable. You're probably more than okay on Dragoon Red Mage, especially because Dragoon's a pretty good powerhouse. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hiya. Hi. I'm taking a group through minimum item level no echo coils, and we're nearly done now. Working on finishing up second Savage, and as our last little challenge, we're getting absolutely smashed by Melusigns. Fight is kind of miserable. Absolutely awful. Terrible fight. Hate it. With every fiber of my being. Wanted to ask what the response was for Savage Coil back when it was on content. I know it had an abysmally low completion rate, but among those who did, was it considered better than normal second Coil? For the people who wanted an absolute cutting edge it just end game at that point, yes, it was considered significantly better. I'd say probably the biggest improvement is turn 8. Turn 9 is very similar, and turn 6 was really just forcing you to do the turn 6 mechanics. Turn 7 is noticeably the worst one that people will go back on. It has incredibly specific phase push timings, and if you are off by even a second or two, it becomes more and more miserable. It's just, there's just enough things there to piss you off across that entire encounter that I'm not surprised that you're having a miserable time with it. But you're right, almost no one had an opinion on it because almost nobody did it. Like, it was really just they fixed all of the cheese strats from normal and then multiplied the number of, like, literally it's like, oh, there's 1 poison in normal mode. What if there were 2 poisons and then 4 poisons in Melusign? And then it's like, oh, with the Avatar, what if, you know, oh, everyone just stacks on the bomb. Well, what if it knocked away? And then, oh, what if there were 2 bombs instead of 1? Like, it literally, oh, what if there were 2 tethers from the... Like, that's literally all it is. Like, it's not very creative in complete honesty. It's just trying to force people to do the hardest mechanics and then add, like, 1 or 2 extra things onto it. So nobody really had that. Like, I did it, and it's like we enjoyed it, kind of, but it definitely wasn't that well received. Especially the reward structure, especially the I don't know. There's a lot of things that weren't very good about it. But, yeah, unfortunate that Alexander had to be the next Savage, because let me tell you, that didn't go great either. Well, not Gordius, at least. It depends on who you ask, but it didn't go great either. Hashtag Mondays with the happiest. Lally-ho. Hi. I've been playing Expedition 33 as well, and I love it. I do have issues specifically with the UI UX, but overall it's an achievement by a small team. Even it took them 5 years. Yeah, it's like a team of like 30. Obviously, they outsource stuff, but, you know, they're still the core. I would say they're responsible for the identity of the game, which is, and then they just had other people like do assets for them, which I think is the important thing. Question is the conversation surrounding FF being that every time a game overlaps with FF pops up, it should be a wake-up call or lesson to Square Enix. Yeah. Yeah, I think I know where this is going. 14, it's like, why can't it be like Guild Wars 2? Okay, no, to be fair, the only thing people want it to be like Guild Wars 2 or WoW is the fucking transmog system, because our glam system is so dated. And we're completely right. Those games have better systems for that. So no, that's correct. With 16, it should have been like, dude, I love 16, so I'm never going to agree with that. Ubisoft, well, I mean, Ubisoft needs to look at, yeah. But wait, or with 7 being too, oh, you mean like 7 Remake or Rebirth? I mean, I really enjoyed Remake and Rebirth, so. Should look at Exodus as the standard. Bravely Default don't count since they're AA with cartooning. Yeah, no, that one was weird. I know when people say, when people say Square doesn't make Final Fantasy style game or Final Fantasy games or turn-based RPGs, and you point to Octopath and they're like, but not that. I'm like, or Bravely Default's like, you can't just pick and choose. Those are still good games. So, you know, yeah, no, I totally feel you on that one. My take is that I don't care when people have this discussion, because they clearly can't just enjoy something for what it is or not enjoy something for what it is. They need everything to be like quantitative but like they need their opinion to be like supported by others, and they need they need the things they love to be exactly the way they want them to be, or within a specific frame that they have deemed as the only thing that they can have. Like, it's not worth engaging in the discussion. Dude, like I said this earlier, if a lot more games were like Expedition 33, we'd have a lot more bad games like Expedition 33. And then we'd have to worry every time a game that looks like it comes out. And then you're like, oh, is this some Expedition 33 copy? But then if a new good one comes out, it's just like, oh, is this a knockoff effect? It's a disaster every time. Like, we've seen it with Souls games. Now every game that's a Souls-like is, that's become a whole like thing of pride. It's a perfect example of why I don't want that. I'm more so, and besides, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth are like masterful edits to what 7 would be in an action-y scenario. Like, I genuinely cannot have imagined how well they would have executed 7 Remake and 7 Rebirth. So I can definitely would not ever drag those into the conversation, because they knocked it out the park, especially with the combat system with those games. But yeah, no, my take is that it's not even worth engaging. Like, this question being asked to me is as much as I'll engage in it, pretty much. Hashtag Mondays with Mistet. I know it's just a typo, don't worry. Happy. Howdy, Mr. Happy. Hi, so you got it right that time. Hope you had a great weekend. Me too. It's still Saturday. I'm recording a day early again because I'm trying to get on top of everything, recording wise. Need advice for a friend who lost her 14 account due to RL issues, abusive relationship. Ugh, hate that. Would she be at a disadvantage to skip a Realm Reborn if she hasn't been too long played it? Or as she hasn't been too long ago. So she didn't play it that long ago, is what you're saying. Okay. Or she should just start from square one, forgetting all she knows or thinks she knows. I would just say play it again. Like, here's the thing. It depends on how much she even remembers about how to play the game at all. She'll pick it up quick. I would just say, at this point, if I had to choose between the two, I would just start over. Like, a Realm Reborn is not that far, and I'm willing to bet that they weren't. If that's as far as they were, they probably weren't even done with it. So, like, it's like so little progress that it sounds like it would be just less of a headache. But I also am not going to ask about the entire situation. I don't know why it's even a choice between one or the other. So it's even harder for me to make the proper judgment. But in a vacuum with what I'm understanding, I would just do it again, to be honest. She purchased Dawn Trail Digital Collector's Edition. Does that include other items, mounts? No, every Collector's Edition is its own set of items. So no, they would not include all of the other ones. Lastly, do you think 8.0 will carry the Dawn Trail label forward? Wait, what? Or do you think Serenos will pull a cash grab and make 8.0? Wait, I don't understand this question. Do you think 8.0 will carry the Dawn Trail label forward? What is that? I don't know what that... Are you saying, will it just be called Dawn Trail 8.0? No? Every expansion has its own name. Maybe I don't understand this question. It's literally a Realm Reborn, Heaven's Ward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, like every expansion has its own name. It's not a cash grab, it's an expansion. They're not just going to say, hey, it's Dawn Trail again. It's Final Fantasy 14 Dawn Trail expansion. Final Fantasy 14 is the label. Dawn Trail is the expansion. So it's going to have a different name, because it will always have a different name, because that's how every expansion works. So maybe I didn't understand the question entirely, but you might want to clarify for me. Hashtag Monday. Oh my God, that's a lot of text. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, hello. Hi. I have 2 questions. I'm mainly interested in hearing what you have to say about the first one. I'm a relatively new player, caught up to current content in 6.0 and cleared the Savage in 6.1. During 6.1 and cleared every Savage on patch since. Nice. Wanting to do ultimates for a while, experienced a certain barrier that stopped me from clearing the ones I've tried. Usually try to PF endgame content I do for older ultimates. Feels like the majority of people in PF have little to no experience in endgame content and gravitate towards these ultimates due to ease of unlocking them. Let's find fresh parties for ultimates like tier DSR to be very scarce, so trying my hand. Well, okay, so let me finish, because I already have an idea of what to say. So I also have too much time on my hands right now. I'd like to allocate some of these into older ultimates in PF. So, okay, so expectations unrealistic is simply anecdotal evidence that I've accepted as fact. So, couple of things. One, I don't know what data center you're on, so I don't know what your population is like. On NA, for example, you pretty much have to go to Ether to do ultimate PFs. But I will say this. One element that's missing from all this, and I hate that this has to be part of the answer because it's awful, is Discord. There are Discord PFs that form, basically, where the Discord has people post, hey, I'm doing an ultimate with this experience, or I want to plan an ultimate for this level of experience for this many hours. And then it effectively becomes like a pre-planned pug that's not a static that sometimes evolves for some people into statics. I don't know the names. I know there's Nor, I think, for NA, and I think there's another one as well. But those ones are like, they're like basically PF in Discord is the best way I would describe them. They do have some other stuff. Like there is obviously the Ultimate Project, but that's for people who are already like at the end of fights. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You go through and you just try to find, I mean, making your own PFs is almost always the answer. And you are always going to get clowns. It's going to happen every time. You're either going to get clowns or you're going to get people who, are trying and it's not really within their skill means to be doing. And that's not their fault for trying, but it's just like, it's an acknowledgement you have to be able to make. But yeah, I would look into Ultimate Discords that just generally make groups that are not like, you know, clear for one groups. They're literally like where other groups form and people are able to more easily communicate. You might even see in the private tab a lot of like private Ultimate parties. Those are very often going to be coming from something like an Ultimate Discord as well. 2, do you think the gearing system will ever change? No. Not significantly to the point where I can see the rest of your question will have its purpose. I really have to play more than one job role while progging, but during reclears to do the weekly caps in place, I can barely get myself to cap tomes after getting best on my main job, let alone doing it for any. I would highly recommend doing the hunt, because the hunt is great for capping tomes, getting materia, and not spending any money. Also find issues due to often ending up in reclear groups where in my experience usually fizzle out once everyone gets their main geared. Yeah, not too uncommon with that one. I wouldn't expect much. Basically, by gearing one job, you are gearing every job within the role. Now, with melees, that's tough because that's 3 separate jobs, which might be where your experience is coming from. But for casters, tanks, healers, and fizz ranged, it usually works out better where you can be like, oh, let me try this week, you know? But yeah, no, for melees, it's a disaster because you basically get 2 jobs each. I mean, honestly, swapping between those 2 jobs is not the end of the world, so you can always do that. But no, yeah, the weapon part is the part that gets tough. But no, I don't see them changing it substantially. There might be more content that rewards gear in certain points. Like it really depends on if they hear the feedback that endgame people have been making about the release cadence of their content at the start of an expansion, and that could kind of fizzle forward or drizzle into like the next expansion and end up with more gearing options as opposed to changing gearing. But it would be bold to assume that. So I'm going to just say no in a general sense. Hashtag Saturdays for you, Mondays for... How did you know I was going to do a Saturday one today? You're brilliant. Hey there, Happy. Hope your week was good. It was very good. Sophie and I, we got to have some adventures. We posted some of them on socials. It was fun. With Relics on the horizon, we've seen a few different approaches to how the devs choose to balance the grind for multiple. Be that not at... Starting over. Be that not at like the first few steps, one-time grinds in Bozia. We'll just make them all easy for Endwalker now with Cosmic Stacking Armory bonus. Well, I mean, these are crafting relics. I wouldn't use these as the example. Think devs should be balancing relics around folks looking for the full set? And if so, what's your preferred approach? I like the idea of the full set being something that looks approachable. I think when you build the relics in isolation of each other, you kind of communicate to the people that are doing it and playing the game that the end of their journey ends at the first weapon. Now, to be fair, regardless, that could be true for a lot of people. They may just not have any interest. Now, with crafting and gathering, like you mentioned for Cosmic, a little bit different, but it does have that armory bonus system that makes it kind of work out. And even you didn't even mention like Eureka, for example. Eureka, the leveling is part of your first one, but when you're already max level and you start getting the elemental bonus from Hydados, it really accelerates your ability to do the rest of them. So it does act as that kind of return method as well. I think it's smart to make subsequent ones look doable to a player who may finish the first one and go, should I do another? You don't want that player to look at the mountain they just climbed and go, oh, do I really want to do that again? You want them to look at the path that they kind of carved through the mountain and go, okay, that I can do. Because it gets them playing the game longer, it gets them engaging in an activity longer, and it potentially gets them more drawn to community-like aspects. People who are in the Eureka communities spend a lot of time together, and they're very frequent. Like, if you go do like a Baldessian Arsenal run, there's a good chance like 15, 20 people there have some jokes that they know, and they get to spend time with each other all the time, and they're part of something that gives their playtime more value because it's a positive and fun experience for them that's reinforced by other people. And I think that with relics and how long they take, there's this like consensus among the people who do them that they kind of suffer together. Even if they're kind of having fun doing the content, the idea of doing that many is often a suffer together thing that brings people together in a very weird way, but it does bring them together. And so I think the idea of deliberately, like if you finish a weapon and you look back and the next weapon's not as bad as the first one, or the next tool is not as bad as the first one, you just get people to maybe engage in the system longer and to become part of something a little bigger. Not always, but you have a higher probability of it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Happy. Hi. As a follow-up to my last question about the new extended expansion release cycle, if you were to guess, where do you think 8.0 will release in fall 2026? Oh, no shot of fall. No. You're looking at winter at the very earliest. No, fall. No, it's like, it's 6 months. So it was what? We were at like an end of June release for Dawn Trail or something. Yeah. You're looking at, add 6 months to that. So you're looking at December. I personally think it'll be the middle/end of January of 2027. There was never a chance you're going to see fall 20. If they do fall 2026, that'd be a miracle. I shouldn't say it can't happen. It could obviously happen. But it would not be within my scope of prediction, and nor would I encourage others to think that way. No, January 2027 is the earliest I would expect 8.0. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. How's it going? Going good. Curious if you're going to make an Expedition 33. Yes, I need to work on that this weekend. I have 100%ed it. I also finished my Platinum for 13 too, so all my mainline Final Fantasy games are Platinumed, and I can get balling through that. My Final Fantasy 9 Platinum video might be done this week. I gotta get that done. I have the 11-14 stuff to do this week as well. I got the 9. Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff to get done. But yeah, no, an Expedition 33 video is another thing that I would like to make a video on. I've got some good things to say, and I absolutely have some criticisms of it, as much as I think it's going to be a turn-based RPG that will affect me for years to come, and will definitely be a high standard for me to hold, and especially if Sandfall makes other games. So, yeah, no, I definitely want to make that video. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy. Hi. Question, do you think that increasing the length between each patch is the main reason more people are angry about X1 and X5 content droughts? Or do you think moving Disciple field exploration like Cosmic into X1 drought is enough to fix that on its own? No. So I answered the second question first. No, it's not enough. I think it's part of the reason, but it's honestly just a lingering thing that's always been felt by those of us who have played the game for the last decade. And also, I'll say this, Endwalker just had too many misses. So the patience level is at an all-time low. Island Sanctuary, not that well received. Variant Criterion, not that well received. Even Eureka Orthos, not that well received. So Endwalker just had a pretty significant number of misses, combined with some of the highest difficulty content we'd had in the game in a very long time. To the point where pretty much everyone was fed up, and that bled over to Dawn Trail. But the key problem is not necessarily getting cosmic exploration or content like it earlier. That's a part of the solution, but it's not the main problem. The main problem is that they talk about all of the content for the expansion during all the fan festivals and those live letters, but that's content that's so far away from the expansion launch that when you get past the initial assessment of the story, the raid, the Savage, and whatever comes out in that first little push of the game, you're left with every promise the expansion made being months to years away. And that's just not a good look. When you talk about things at fan festivals and live letters, if you're a new player, those are the things you're like, oh man, I can't wait to do that. When's it coming out? 11 months after the expansion comes out, which is what it was for Occult. Who's going to be excited to get into the expansion and keep playing when they could just not do that and wait till the thing they want is out? So it's about getting content that they talk about in fan festivals out at a pace that excites people at the start of an expansion, because that's when everyone is flooded into play. That's when your highest player peak and concurrent counts come in, is during that time. So when they start to get bored, you want to give them something to chew on. And a Savage raid is not going to do that for a lot of people. It's nice for the start of an expansion. It's not something we don't want, but it's not going to be enough for most people. And that is the core problem. So what you've suggested and what you're saying, well, would that fix it? It's only a piece of the problem. The problem is talking about all those things and waiting so long for all of them, for any of them at all, when they should be something that we start getting earlier, even if that means they don't get updated constantly the entire time. Like, what if Chaotic was now and Cosmic was however long ago and Occult was before? Like, if Cosmic and Occult were in the 0.1x cycle and then we got Chaotic and like a Criterion now and then another Cosmic planet, but then Occult was still not happening for a little while down, like, that would still be a better reception than anything else later. And then all of that is still being piled up for the 0.5 expansion on top of things like the Deep Dungeon and the different raid tiers coming out and our normal like. All the other things people already like would still be there. We would just be getting that gratification at a point when the game is peaking and giving those players, again, something to chew on. And I think that's something they need to do. Hashtag Mode. I love Mode. With Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy. Hi. Notice that you didn't make guides for the Savage tier. Is there any particular reason for why not? Always use your guys to visually understand what's going on, even if the parties you join might end up using different strats. It was largely a time constraint. And honestly, it's become a lot less fun to make Savage guides. For a number of reasons. So one of my favorite things to do in a raid tier is for our group to develop a strategy that works for us. That isn't necessarily the same thing other people are using. Or even if we do that, maybe we see something else in like a VOD and we just kind of want to adopt that. But the bottom line is there's almost no chance any of that is going to be used, right? And unfortunately, just learning how a fight works is not how people PF in Final Fantasy XIV. People want to be told when this cast bar starts, I stand here, I move there. The number of people who fundamentally don't understand how to play Final Fantasy XIV is at an all-time high. And a lot of that is people listening, but not understanding. And when I make a guide, I want everyone to understand why they are doing what they're doing. Because if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, you are more likely to be able to figure things out for yourself in the future. And that level of individual progression, to me, is gratifying. And I would want it to be more satisfying. I want my guide to teach someone to not need my guides in the future. Like, they may still need them. They may still want them. They may still use them, even if they don't necessarily need them. But they should be able to say, oh, when this type of thing happens, this is the reaction that I should have to it. So when I see that something like it, I go, oh yeah, it's like that. It's why most long-term players, we see a point-blank AoE and we call it a chariot. That's because of second Coil turn 4. That's nail. Like, it's a 10-year-old fight. It's such a boomer thing. It's why clock spot AoEs, us old head boomers call them Proteans, because it was A30S doing those Protean waves. Some people can call them flamethrowers, like an Omega. Like, there's different options that people can result back to. But the point is that they've identified it, they've learned it, and now that informs them going forward. Guides right now, the majority of the assets that people are using do not incorporate game knowledge into the capacity to actually do them. This leads to a number of major problems. Problem number one, people don't learn how to actually play Final Fantasy XIV. This is why your PFs that seem like they should be going fine are hitting in rages when you're way over geared, because people are looking at diagrams and not actually looking at other people even playing the game to see how they should be playing to make sure they keep rolling their GCD, how to maintain uptime, how to move for mechanics ahead of time. If you've ever watched an old VOD of people going through fights and you watch the things they do, you understand, oh, they're like doing that. Oh, they're like making this little movement in advance because they know they're going to need to be there. Or, oh, the melee is like, you know, oh, about halfway through the cast bar, they'll step away from the AoE to make sure they don't get hit. And then they don't really lose a whole lot. Instead, you have people that just say, okay, I need to just make sure this thing that happens in this diagram. And keep in mind, this isn't a problem with Hector or raid plan or anything. It's a problem with thinking that is reinforced by the way these assets are used. Nobody who makes guides is at fault for the way people use them. I didn't like when people used to make my strats and be like, no, you have just a Mr. Happy strat. I hate that. You should never be like so strat strict like that. You should 100% be trying to, inform and improve over time if something better that's easier to execute and isn't in just learning something different for the sake of learning something different happens. But that's not what happens nowadays. Everyone just wants the raid plan. They want to go to where their dot is, and they don't actually want to learn how to play Final Fantasy XIV. That's not a Final Fantasy XIV that I even want to really teach people in the scope of. Like, sometimes I'm like, because I want to make guides. I love making guides. I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of making them. And I know they still help people even if they're not the strats like you just said. But my God, is it not worth the headache of people who just... There's a mix of people who see that and they only learn how to do that because, again, they don't fundamentally understand how to play Final Fantasy XIV. They just want to copy what they saw in the video. The other side is the people who then play with those players and then come back to me and they're like, look what you fucking did. And I'm like, well, look what's happening out there anyway. It's a disaster everywhere you look. Don't just look at me. You should be looking at the players, and those players need to improve for themselves. And if they don't, you have to accept that because it's the party finder and it's random people and they don't owe you anything. So get over it and just play as well as you can. Yeah, it's not a fun landscape to make guides. I don't know why any of them do it, other than the fact that I don't know. Maybe it's for the views. Maybe they really just enjoy it. Because we had Hector on State of the Realm, and when he started airing his grievances, I was like, "Yup, yep." That's why I don't do it as much anymore. So, yeah, you might want to be careful. Y'all out there might want to be careful when you start talking shit, because there may not be even people who even want to do this shit at some point. All right, now after that hour-long answer, hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy. Hi, how are you doing? A little warm after that last answer, but otherwise great. Wanted to know which game you would recommend I play first between Metaphor and Clare Obscure. Clare Obscure is the shorter experience. You are more likely to finish it, and it is also new, and it supports a smaller studio that I'd like to see make more games. As for actual game quality, it really depends, because I would say they don't necessarily fall in the same category, other than being turn-based RPGs, and there's obviously some UI inspirations for Clare Obscure that it takes from Metaphor. I would say that Metaphor is a lot more relationship building. It's a far more integral part of the experience, the amount of time you spend going through school and like getting your social skills up. There's nothing that's quite that deep in Clare Obscure. So if you value that versus playing a turn-based game, that enforces like 50 to 60% of the time you'll be playing in Metaphor. Clare Obscure is a much faster paced experience that has the social moments. It has the building between the characters that you can do optionally. If you really want to, unlock certain things for them and like really get to hear their whole story. Yes, you have that there. But with all of that, without even touching New Game Plus, you're probably looking at 50 to 55 hours, maybe 60. I took 55 hours about to 100% it. And I honestly could have done it in less. I was just choosing to not do certain things because I didn't want to completely break the game. Whereas with Metaphor, you're looking at minimum probably 100, more likely 120 or beyond. So I'd rather you just pay like 40, 50 bucks, get Clare Obscure, beat that in 50 to 55 hours, get a nice, well-paced experience, and then play Metaphor, which is the higher investment experience, because they're both high-quality games with different facets that I find strong in them. But Clare Obscure to me is the game I'd rather somebody try if they had to pick between the two right now. Hashtag Mr. Happy Fun Days. Hey, hi. You said we're probably only getting one chaotic this expansion. Probably because it was an experiment. If this happens, do you think Criterion will be in 0.35? I don't know, because we have Deep Dungeon in 0.35, but I still think that we have Deep Dungeon at 0.3x. Criterion doesn't even have to be in 0.35. It could be in 0.31, 0.32, 0.36. We don't know. But in 0.3x, I'll operate this question in 0.3x. I don't know when Criterion is going to come. Where would I prefer Criterion to be? If we have an ultimate in 0.3x, I don't want Criterion there. At that point, I would rather have... Honestly, I want Criterion in an even-numbered patch. And here's why. I want it in 0.4x since we didn't get it in 0.2x. I want that alternate gearing method to be available sooner. And I think that in terms of timing, 0.2x is probably the best time to release a singular Criterion. Maybe you could do it in 0.2 and 0.4. Because I think 8 weeks into a raid tier, people are really chomping at the bit to get... We just answered this question earlier. Alternate jobs and have means with which to gear them, or even the opportunity to use them in a less competitive environment. And I think a Criterion, the normal mode ones, is the place to have that. We're at the point where the gear's been obtainable. Maybe people just haven't been able to get through it, but maybe now they can do the Criterion and get some gear. I think point to like 8 weeks after the Savage raid is like the perfect time for Criterion, as long as they've incorporated gear progression into it. That will assist the players who either haven't finished the raids in that 8 weeks or have and are now looking for more gear for their alt jobs, etc., etc. And I would like to see it be an alternate source of gear. You know, you're asking about 760 specifically, but more in general, yes, I would like it to be an alternate source of either, realistically, just all gear, but accessories at the bare minimum, and maybe a weapon as well. Yeah, there's options in there, but yeah, definitely another alternate gearing option. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello there. Hi, good sir. Good sir to you too. I don't know why I read it like that. Seeing that Dynamus data center is not filling up, do you think they'll get rid of it or just keep it there? There's no point in getting rid of it. Honestly, one of the biggest problems with Dynamus is that everyone comes to Ether and Primal for like most of the activities that they can do. So there's no reason to stay on Dynamus. Like so new players, I'm not gonna say new players, players in general are really not that hype about changing servers. Like, there are people who just look at the market board on their own server and go, well, I guess that's the price. And they never think to look at the other servers, like market boards, ever. It's wild to me because I always search through all of them. So in that same vein, when people see all the endgame content happens on Ether, they just want to have their FC. They want to be over there, be in their FCs, be in their link shells on Ether, if they're a big PvP or Primal. And that's a problem. The cross-server the cross-server duty finder, cross-data center duty finder / cross-data center party finder is literally the #1 thing that needs to happen. Then nobody will really shy away from being anywhere because they can be on Dynamus. People can make characters with Dynamus, make FCs, make link shells, everything, because they don't need to be on Ether for anything. They can have the easy housing on Dynamus and maybe the slightly smaller populations without concern about that. Now, I don't think that would make them boom, but it would certainly make the amount of people that regularly spend time on their native server higher, and then it means that people aren't as afraid to make characters on those servers, so the population is more stable, not necessarily popping. But yeah, no, that's I think the more important thing that needs to happen. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Howdy. Hi. What's a dish you made that looked hard to make but wasn't so bad? I have it the other way around. There was a dish I thought would be really easy, and it was kind of like a physical pain, and that was frico. Frico is literally just 1 part onion, 1 part potato, 2 part cheese. You make like a giant tart, and you like cook it on like really high temperature, but you have to cook the onions low and slow for like half a fucking hour, and you have to be stirring them the whole time, and then you have to mix in the other bits, the potato and the cheese, and it's just this like really heavy mixture that you have to give a lot of attention to make sure that it's like properly distributed, and there's a lot of physical activity that goes into it. So that's the other way around though. Looked hard to make but wasn't so bad. Not really anything. Like, I've made some dishes that like when you see them you're like, oh my god, that looks amazing, but I don't think like the hardest dishes to make are hard dishes to make. I don't think there's one that looks hard that isn't hard, especially if you're an amateur cook. It's a matter of you taking the time to learn it and then it getting easier, like a Wellington or something. Like, it's probably like, oh, I just got to make sure I got to make the duxelle, and I got to remember to get the mustard, and you know, I've never worked with puff pastry before, and how do I know when the meat is, like, all those things, if you've never done it, are probably hard, but like, you do it a couple times and then it becomes second nature because you've already done it once, and then it's just kind of a pain to do. So yeah, it's probably something like that if I had to guess, but I haven't made one, so. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. Hope all is well with you and that you haven't gotten too sucked in. I mean, I 100% Expedition 33, so I'm as not sucked in as you can be anymore. I've been meaning to ask you this for a few weeks. Has your experience with RPGs like Expedition 33 and ReFantasia changed your opinion on 16? Nope. Love the characters and stories of 16, but lately I feel the actual gameplay was subpar. I love the gameplay, and I've played through it multiple times, and I played through it with multiple restrictions based on the first time and how I played it. The second time I played, yep, nope. That has not changed anything at all. I take games differently. Again, I said earlier, games don't need to be like other games. Games need to be taken for as they are and what they are. And changing them because you just played something else that you like doesn't make any sense. Because again, then I don't need to say it again. I've already made the point like 3 times. No, it doesn't change anything at all. I'm a huge Devil May Cry fan, huge Final Fantasy fan. I got both of them combined. And I always have a good time going back and replaying 16. I wish I had more time to finish my most recent replay through, but for the PC version. But, you know, other games releasing. Got to keep up with it. All right, I'm like almost an hour into recording because I went hard on that one answer. So let me just blast through the rest of them. Hashtag Mondays with Cosmic Happy. Hi, hope you have a great day. Hi, and hello, and thanks, and you too. Not familiar with the structures of MMO servers, but I want to ask, is it feasible to put worlds from a less populated data center and add it to the very populated one? Similar to the other question, it is, but I don't think they're going to do that. I don't see a point, and I think that the other issue that I addressed is far more important than combining servers. But yeah, totally feasible. It's been done for MMOs for decades now. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. I was wondering, at one point, do you think the grind becomes too much? For context, I think the grind becomes too much when there are no checkpoints along the way to let you know that you're getting anywhere. So, so you say, I finished the Shared Fate in DT and looked at how much getting them out would require. It kind of seems ridiculous. I'd say that that's harder now, especially because there's not as many people doing it. When I did it, there were like 3, 4, 5 parties all the time for it at the start of an expansion. So way easier, so it doesn't seem as daunting. Now it's definitely a little more daunting. I would say when there's no feasible checkpoint to let you feel like you've made progress is the problem. So like picking up a voucher a day, for example, or picking up a few vouchers every day is feasible. And you can be like, okay, if I did this for enough days, I can make it. And if I took a few days off, it wouldn't really matter. But if you imagine if you had to just complete the entirety of it in one fell swoop, and there was no, the only thing that was changing was the total number of gemstones that you had, that would be when a grind feels like it's too much. When there's just there's nothing in any essence that can mitigate what you are doing. The Leave Quest one is a pretty good example of that, where I know there's some achievements along the way, but there's nothing that feels good, and it's time gated to boot. That especially kills it. If something is both time gated, like how many times you can do it, and you need to do it a ridiculous number of times, because then it genuinely makes you feel like if you don't log in for any period of time, like you've genuinely hurt your odds of ever completing it. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi. Hope all is well for you. Warcraft adding a new feature, you can do your rotation 1 button. Saw that. Yeah, it's 13 to 20% less effective. What do you think about it? I subsequently hate it, as well as I think it completely doesn't matter. It's sadder. It's sad. And here's why it's sad. It's not sad because they're doing it. Because here's the thing. Final Fantasy XIV and WoW both have an add-on that does this already. And WoW, it's I think the guy Hekili, I think is the guy who made it. I don't know if it's some similar person or different person who does it for 14. It already exists. So, it is what it is. You know what I mean? And honestly, theirs is probably worse. I mean, the WoW's is probably worse than the add-on one, I'd assume. Because the add-on one is trying to make you, is not trying to deliberately nerf you. It's trying to give you an option to play the game with 1 button. But it's sad because being 20% worse than a player who is manually pressing their buttons, which, by the way, manually pressing your buttons does not mean you're the best. That 13 to 20%, that's 13 to 20% worse than not the best player in the world. It's just a guaranteed 13 to 20% less effectiveness. But that's a significant improvement for the average player. The average player is not doing 13 to 20% worse. And this is true in 14 and WoW. They're doing way worse than that. So the fact that this is a buff to those players is, to me, sad. I'm not saying this button should be worse. I'm saying that it's unfortunate that it's at such a point where this is actually a genuine improvement for a significant portion of players. I also don't understand the second half of the question. Should 14 have it so it can have hard mechanics and hard rotations? That question doesn't have anything to do with the first part. having this doesn't have the same thing to do with hard mechanic and hard rotation, because the rotation's not hard and the mechanics are hard anyway. Like there's already basically no give and take between the two at the moment. Like nothing discernible. The only time it's discernible is major downtime mechanics. So you're effectively asking if downtime mechanics would become uptime mechanics. And the answer is no, because I'm not going to lie, if you do 13 to 20% worse in some of these fights, you're enraging, which isn't great. So, like, if you're doing 13 to 20% worse on, like, ad phase, MCS, you might not get past the ad phase still. So I don't think it really helps quite the same way, and I don't think it really opens any opportunities for us. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello. Hi. Good morning, Mr. Happy. Good morning. Hopefully a quick question. What is the snapshot point for damage buffs? It is when the action is applied while you have buffs active. For example, if you're on Bard and you put 2 dots on the boss, you put both your dots on the boss, and then you buff. Those buffs are not those dots are not buffed because your buffs are on you, but you didn't cast the abilities while you were buffed. However, if you then Iron Jaws and it extends both of the dots, now they're both buffed because you've reapplied them. So you have to have a buff actively on you in order to boost the damage of an ability. Now, that's for dots. So the point at which the button is hit during the animation or at some other point, it is when the button is hit. There's a reason why some rotations have you cap, this is historical from Monk, have had you cap your FPS. It is because you can actually cause the buff to fall off a couple of frames later, but you can still hit the GCD before that moment. So it is the moment you press the GCD. Okay, and then I think this is the last question. Hashtag Mr. Fishing Mondays. No. Hey, Haps. Hi, how you happen? How's Ivy? Ivy's doing great. It was her birthday this weekend. She just turned 5. Workout question. What do you think is better glute workout? Full deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts? Well, A, better for what? And B, Romanian deadlifts. Like, a full deadlift is not something I would tell most people they need to do in the gym. It's a nice way to build your overall strength, and the ability to do that movement does have a lot of functional use for your body. The Romanian deadlift is literally like all about engaging the posterior chain of your legs. Like you're trying to get your hamstrings, especially when you're doing a Romanian deadlift, or you're trying to get your glutes, or you're trying to get the rear part of your legs. The deadlift is like a full body motion. It's not a back motion. It's actually mostly legs, but it's not like a good hypertrophic movement. It's a good strength movement, and it's really good at burning calories, but it is more of a core fundamental than it is something that you would do to build glutes. If you're going to build glutes, you would do something entirely different. I mean, you could do, God, I can't use my brain right now. You do hamstring extensions, or you could do, or I guess lower back extensions, but they end up being hamstring and glute extensions. You could do the what is it called? The glute thrust. You could do a squat. Like a deadlift would not be anything I'd recommend, but if you're gonna pick one, the Romanian's the easy choice. Anyway, that's gonna be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. So keep an eye out. We have quite a full schedule of videos this week. Please be on the lookout for all of them. So thank you for watching. Again, shout out to the sponsors on Patreon. Steel Series, of course. That 12% discount's always there. It supports the channel heavily. It supports the sponsor heavily. And with that, I will see all of you fine ladies and gentlemen in the next video. Until then, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.